Palisade Radio is brought to you by First Majestic Silver Corp., one of the world's purest and fastest growing silver mining companies.
Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell. Returning back on the show today is one of my favorite guests, Bill Holter of the Holter Sinclair collaboration. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back, Colin. Thanks.
I'm trying to come up with a subject that you haven't talked too much on in the recent past, and one thing that's on my mind a lot right now is just how darn cheap these mining stocks are. A lot of people thought that maybe we were coming out of a bottom. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a pretty big rally, and still we don't know. We could be out of the bottom, but it's looking more and more like we could even hit new lows here. I want to get just an overall opinion from you on your view of the mining sector. I know that you like having physical, but what's your view towards owning these stocks?
Well, they're at giveaway prices right now. They have come off bottom. They are acting better. But you've got companies that are trading virtually at their cash in the bank level. And that means their properties or gold in the ground is valued at zero. I mean, you're buying gold at under $10 an ounce.
Yeah, it's incredible how cheap it is. I've had Rick Rule on the show several times, and he speaks about this concept of optionality, which is you can buy gold in the ground for, like you said, $10. It's even as cheap as $1 to $2, depending on how low of the grade you want to go. And you just sit there, and when gold starts to move back up, the price of gold in the ground is going to rise tremendously to maybe $50, $100, $150 per ounce, and that's quite a gain to be made. Bill, what kind of stocks, nothing in particular, but what is it that interests you in the gold mining sector today?
I would kind of use a barbell approach. I would look, the majors have been decimated, and you've got companies in production, and then the other end of the spectrum are the pure exploration plays. There are companies, I know of an exploration company that has a 43-101 with over 3 million ounces of gold in the ground, and the company's trading, I think it's, $12 or $15 million. That's the market cap. That's ridiculous. You're looking at, $5 an ounce? $7 an ounce? It's absurd. So, I look at both ends of the spectrum, but both ends of the spectrum are extremely cheap at giveaway prices, and the leverage in the mining shares is multiples of the physical itself. So it is a good idea to have some mining shares, and if you haven't done it, you're getting all-time record low valuations. You're basically getting in for free.
I've heard you talk in the past about your fear of having your shares held in the financial system. If you buy your shares through a brokerage house, which most people do, there's a chance, however small it might be or however large it might be, that if things go far enough south, that the shares in your account can actually be collateralized and end up being owned by the brokerage house and are no longer in your possession. Do you still have a fear of that occurring, and what do you do to protect against it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's a very real possibility. If you leave the shares in the brokerage house, they more than likely will be collateralized. So you simply contact your broker or do it via computer share or whatever. You have the certificates delivered out to you. That's Jim Sinclair's GATA. Get out of the system. Get your certificates in hand, because they're real, they're in hand, they can't be taken away.
Okay, thanks for that. On the topic of global politics, out of all the people that I interview, I think that you follow probably the most closely to call it non-mainstream events that are occurring around the world. Russia, Saudi Arabia, China trying to get off of the petrodollar, different types of political conflicts going on, potential wars that might break out. I want to ask you what's most pressing on your mind the last week or two in terms of a major event most people don't have their eye on, but that could catapult either the gold price up or the U.S. economy down.
The answer to that is Russia. Let me just step back for a moment. We were talking about getting your certificates out of the system. There's a guy who works with Sprott Global, works with Rick Rule. His name is Mishka vom Dorp. If you contact Sprott Global, that's what he specializes in, is helping people get their certificates out, helps them with Rule 144 stock, etc. So contact him, and he can help you. To answer your question, the most pressing geopolitical event right now has got to be Russia. Russia has gone in with their support for Assad in Syria, and it just looks to me like the U.S. is being kicked out of the Middle East. And you could add to that event two others. One, of course, is the plane that fell out of the sky. Planes don't fall out of the sky. It was probably an internal explosion, although now I saw a story today where it looks like there was some damage to the outside. Obviously, it was a man-made event, so that's a problem. The other thing, which has gotten no press whatsoever, is King Salman from Saudi Arabia plans to meet in Moscow about a month from now with Putin, and one can only imagine what they're going to be talking about. I would imagine one of the things that they talk about is their settlement for oil. Because if you go back, I think it was a week or 2 weeks back, Mr. Putin made it very clear that their oil, their trade would only be settled in dollars. I'm sorry, only be settled in rubles or yuan, and they would not accept dollars and not accept euros. So adding euros to the list was a big poke at Europe, kind of pushing them, in my view, either side with us or winter's coming. Because they do supply quite a bit of natural gas to Europe. So that I'm sure is going to be on the agenda. And were Saudi Arabia to step up and say, well, okay, we will accept euros, we'll accept rubles, yuan, yen, etc., just go back to 2011, 2013. You saw Hussein and Gaddafi both displaced from power because they made the comments that they were going to accept euros for settlement, and that was a big no-no, and they were basically taken out.
Yeah, I think there's a misguided view that many Americans have that is Putin is not a very well-liked leader, and that while the Russian economy has come off a bit, that's hurt his approval ratings, which is dead wrong. In fact,
it's 86% is the last number I heard.
Yeah, I read even higher, and I posted that to one of my social media pages and pointed out that the last time that happened in the United States was probably back in the days of our founding father, which somebody corrected me was wrong, and in fact, the first George Bush during the time of his Middle East crisis had a 91% rating. But he has a very high rating right now, and I can only imagine when oil prices go back up and many of the other natural resources that Russia's economy is based on go back up, that they might become a true global power. They already are, obviously, but along the likes of China coming up against the U.S. What do you think?
I believe their power will expand. I don't think they have any real hope of catching up to China. China has built all kinds of infrastructure, all kinds of manufacturing, and they've done that. They've done it basically with borrowed money. They borrowed money to build roads, bridges, ghost cities, airports, train depots, et cetera. They've built manufacturing. They've built real stuff, and they've done it with fiat debt. And when this implosion occurs, the fiat debt will be no longer. It'll have to go through court systems and blah blah blah. But somebody's going to take the loss, and it's the people who lent the money in the first place will take the loss, and the debts won't be paid. But the infrastructure and the manufacturing base will remain.
That's a good point. There's a lot of wealth built into the system. And on that same point, I want to play devil's advocate and ask you a question in terms of the United States and their gold holdings, which many people, including yourself, think are probably not there, maybe not there at all at this point.
Right.
The U.S. dollar, and I heard this in an interview you just did with Greg Hunter, if it were fully backed by gold, the price of gold would have to be something ridiculous like $70,000, $80,000 an ounce. Even if we wake up one day and all of that gold is gone, the United States does have so much wealth in things like real estate, and there is still quite a bit of manufacturing, certainly a knowledge-based economy, all the high-tech jobs out in California. What do you think the effects would be? Because gold is not the only thing that represents wealth in a country. There's other things as well. Have you taken that into thought and played it out in your head what would happen?
Yeah, you're talking about the wealth. For one thing, you're talking about wealth in real estate and the manufacturing base. The manufacturing base is gone. For all intents and purposes, if we were not able to import goods from China, from overseas, our lifestyle would completely change in a day. As far as the wealth in real estate, basically all of the real estate has already been borrowed against and has been levered upon. So you're not talking about free and clear real estate. You're talking about real estate that's got debt against it. So if you want to say that the real estate has already been spent, it has.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Especially, I would think on a level of family by family, most people do not own their homes at this point. And
right, and it's true with businesses. It's true with commercial properties and industrial properties. This is the crux. This is the core of the whole problem with the Western financial system. Pretty much everything has already been borrowed against, levered against, leveraged. There's very little to no unencumbered collateral left, which leaves only one thing. It leaves printing of currency, and the printing of currencies will end up in hyperinflation. They always have, and they always will. And this, ultimately, the printing is the only way that the debt is going to be able to be paid back. And if not, you have a deflationary collapse. It's one or the other, or both.
And that truly points out just how important having the sound money system that you advocate and having gold backing the money system is. I want to ask you another question, and I don't think any of our listeners know this, but I had tried to record a video series with you while down in Austin. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but we did a short piece on Bitcoin, and this is going to be a topic that starts coming up again in the mainstream soon because Bitcoin's up almost 100% in the last 2 weeks. What do you think about Bitcoin? It has a lot of the same advocates as gold, but it is different in many ways. Any views on how that could play a role in a dollar collapse?
Well, let me say a couple things. First off, Bitcoin or bit anything, that concept is more than likely a trial balloon, test run, whatever you want to call it, for a cashless society. That said, I won't put any capital into Bitcoin or anything like that because what happens with an EMP and the power grid goes down? You can't power your computer up. What happens when they flip the switch to the internet? You're done. It's gone. I don't have faith in it. I would much rather have, for real wealth, I'd much rather have gold and silver. I'd much rather have something that is real as opposed to a concept.
Well, Bill, I want to wrap up the interview and ask you maybe for your next 6 months on what you see unfolding. I know nobody can call things in that short of a time period, but with all the events going on, do you see anything playing out in the near term, election year coming up?
Well, you say election year. I mean, I'm not even convinced we're going to have an election next year. We could very well have a financial collapse and be in martial law, and under that circumstance, you would not have an election. You could see a dogfight in the Middle East between F-15s and 16s versus the Russians, and now you've got a hot war. Would we have an election during World War III? I don't know. With a world that has a rule of law, our markets would have already collapsed, our banks would have already closed. We don't have a rule of law. Our banks are not required any longer to mark to market. They basically mark to fantasy. So they don't have to announce or display that they're insolvent. So what I'm telling you is we should have collapsed within the last 2 years. You're asking me what's going to happen in the next 6 months? I have no idea, but I do suspect we're going to wake up. Probably it'll be on Monday morning. You'll go home on a Friday and everything will be fine, and you'll wake up Monday morning and markets will be closed for some reason.
Bill, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, Colin. Thank you.
Think you understand the junior mining sector and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen? Or are you too stupid?